Welcome to today's event at this year's Swindon Festival of Literature, everyone, which, as a result of restrictions to prevent the spread of the coronavirus, has become a virtual online festival of literature. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, and we do hope that everything is well where you are. We are both pleased and grateful that human ingenuity, cutting-edge science, and digital technology make it possible for this show to go on, well, at least to go on online. Now, one poet said that a poem begins as a lump in the throat, a sense of wrong, a sense of homesickness, a sense of lovesickness. And another said that a good poem is a clear expression of mixed feelings. There were certainly some of those feelings that I had when reading the poems by today's guest author. Now, I wonder how she would describe and how she feels about her own work in her latest collection, A God at the Door, which looks like this and has a terrific cover with a heron in a hallway. It pulls you in. Let's find out. Please join me in giving a Swindon Festival of Literature welcome to today's guest author, international essayist, dancer, Eric Gregory Award winner, and poet Tishani Doshi. Welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be here, even though it's virtual.
Yeah, well, that's very nice of you to say that, even though it's virtual. It's a pity we can't welcome you to our lovely town, Swindon. Swindon in the spring is lovely, comparable to Paris, some people say. Do you know anything about Swindon? Have you been to Swindon?
I'm ashamed to say I don't know much about Swindon, and I've never been to Swindon, but I feel sure that if I ever got to Swindon, I would feel the need to write a poem.
That's a lovely thing to say. The same rainfalls and same sun shines here as anywhere else, main things. Okay, we better get to the topic in hand. Poems in this new collection of yours, A God at the Door. Maybe you, Tishani Doshi, would like to tell us more?
Sure, Matt. Well, I wrote a lot of this collection last year during various stages of lockdown, and I had been writing poems for a few years before that. A lot of them were responses to news items. I was finding that a strange thing had happened in my process of writing, where usually the poem came from in, out. I felt that I was getting triggered by things that were going on outside and that were coming back into me. And that sort of amplified once we got into sort of pandemic life, which we've now all been living with for the last year. So I think the themes of the poems in this book are loneliness and connection, community, individual, micro, macro. It's really about what it means to be walking around in the world, and the membranes and the barriers and the boundaries and the connections that we have or we long for. So yeah, those are some of the things swirling around in my head. Yeah, so I'm just wondering, should I just read a few poems? Is that what should I do next?
That sounds like a lovely idea.
Okay, so I'll start with the poem called Self. And when they ask, what kind of animal would you be? I always say gazelle or lark, never cockroach, even though they'll outlast us all. Once I dreamed I had a body with two heads like those ancient figures from the Zarqa River, bitumen eyes, trunks of reed and hydrated lime, built thick and flat without genitals, nothing shameful to eject except tears. We all want to be monuments, but can't help shoving our fingers in dirt. Imagine a life in childhood, one face to the womb, another to the future. What we remember is the road, peering through a lattice at dusk, the trauma of burial. Will we have terracotta armies to take us through? Will we be alone with the maggots? How good the rain is after a failed romance. Never mind the muddy bloomers. We are appalled by life, and still, any chance we get, we emerge from the earth like cicadas to sing and fuck for a moment of triumph. The shock we carry is that the world doesn't need us. Even so, we go collecting parts, an afternoon by the sea, a game of hopping on and off scales, nose low to the ground, looking for that other glove to complete us. Here I am, globe, spinning planet. Tell me, why are you not astonished?
Tishani, you know I chose some poems and I didn't tell you. You've taken my #1 choice.
Oh!
I just can't help telling you that. There it is at the top of the list.
I'm glad to hear
that.
that.
The idea that we're looking for that other glove, I love it. It's a terrific poem. I've become carried away. I should be more formal and detached.
I'm happy to hear it. I'm thrilled, in fact.
I'm delighted with the choice, Tishani.
Thank you.
Please
yeah. It's this thing of this question of selfhood and the individual and society. It's become it's always been important, but I think this past year has really put into a different focus this sense of we can't only just think of ourselves. We are connected to everyone, and yet what is this thing that makes us human, and all the things we long for in terms of that idea of wanting astonishment as a quality in life. So I'm glad you enjoyed that one. This is called My Loneliness is Not the Same as Your Loneliness. My loneliness is not the same as your loneliness, although they send each other postcards, and when they meet, they relax enough to nap on each other's sofas. I've never felt more alone than when I was being burgled, our bodies facing one another, the burglar and I. Can I help? I asked, but really what I was saying was, stay, don't leave. You say you're sometimes jolted awake by the horror of eating animals. How most mornings it passes, but once you walk downstairs to find a watermelon had exploded on your table, all that rotten red frost seeped through the tablecloth. And even though I understood this explosion exploded something in you, that it has to do with bodies, yours and mine, the animals, the watermelon, the burglar, the thread between us. I could not reach for your hand, could not say, don't live among strangers. They say it starts in childhood, or being alive in a large country where all the roads are empty and lead in. They say, go east, go west, go somewhere, start something. But where can you go if you don't know how to manage thirsty buffaloes? If the past is a bird cage that grows larger the farther away from home you get. I left town, hit a patch of feeling blue, called you. Funny story, you said. Puppy just shredded 18 volumes of the Mahabharata. What's happening with you? I say, I'm on the road. It's the underground guerrilla life for me, dirt and celibacy. All I can hear are birds and sirens, and sometimes birds imitating sirens. We're quick to tell each other, it's okay, it's okay. We can't all be preceded or followed by something. We can't all carry around tanks of oxygen or storm through doors reeking of whiskey and Pernod. There's no known cure. It isn't true about daily B12 shots or living in a commune. In wars, there are almost always the same number dead from starving as from combat. Whatever it is, it lives in the body and will stay till the body runs aground. singers say they hear the next note before they sing it. My loneliness is something like that. I know not just what it is, but how it will sound. There's a child screaming in the playground below, a refrain so shrill it scrapes a layer off the air. She's reassuring herself she's not alone. No one tells her, we're here together. You've been heard.
Terrific.
So this next poem was written, like I was mentioning before, in response to a piece of news. In May last year, there was an attack on a maternity clinic in Kabul, and several mothers and nurses were killed, and babies were shot at. And it was in a year, in a moment when there was just so much horror, to the point of you can't imagine another type of horror until I read this story, and I just felt it's quite hard to respond to something like that, but I felt I needed to respond in the form of a poem, and so this is what came, and it's called After a Shooting in a Maternity Clinic in Kabul. No one forgets there's a war going on, but there are moments you could be forgiven for believing the city is still an orchard, a place where you could make a thing grow. There is always a pile of rubble from which some desperate person struggles to rise, while another person wraps a shawl around their shoulders and roasts marshmallows over a fire. This is not that. This is not bomb dropping from sky, human shield, hostages in a stream, child picking up toy that explodes in her hands, although there's always that. Hope is a booby trap. This is the house you were brought to after crossing a river, leaving the mountains and burnt fields behind, a place of safety where you could be alone with your own startling power. Not why were you out, and why wasn't your face covered, and who told you to climb into that rickshaw, but here, prepare for this most ordinary thing, a birth. And this is not to ask what it means to never see someone again, but to ask what it means not to make it past the first checkpoint of your mother's gates. Never mind all the wild places outside, the mud brick villages, the valleys and harvests and glasses of green tea. Or even to say, I am here to claim the child of Suraya because you know this to be impossible. Even if you could bring a man to recover your sister's corpse and the newborn, where do you go from here? You still have to consider the bodies, the bullet-ridden walls, still have to find the small window of this house and take in the panorama. See, it is raining outside and men weep for their wives, and perhaps the entire world is an orchard that has detonated its crimson fruits, its pomegranates and poppies and tart mulberries to wash these floors red. And those of us who stand outside this house know that nothing will flourish here again. Like crowds who gather for an execution, we can only ask, what does it mean to be born in a graveyard, to enter the world saying, "O thief, O life"?
Thank you, Tishani. While you're going to the next poem, I just want to say what I feel as you read and as I read your poem, that very often in writing groups, poets try to reach for language that is almost too poetic, and you somehow have found plain words, clear words, everyday words that deal with things that are immediate, but you don't sentimentalize. I mean, I don't want to sing your praises too much, but I just felt it was captured in that last poem and the previous poem. There's really something, I mean, I know you've read a lot, but I wonder how you managed to steer away from poeticisms, from language that is too floral.
I think that especially with this collection, but in general, I'm really interested in combining the sense of the lyric, which is important to me. And I think the language of poetry is doing what no other form can do. It's distillation and it's transformation and it's reclamation. And poetry is working on so many levels, and poems are tiny compared to novels or other things. And I feel that the poem is insisting that you enter into a different time zone. And so you could read a news article about an attack on a maternity clinic and read the numbers and read the facts, and you can be deeply moved by that, and feel all sorts of things. But the poem is not trying to just be informational. The poem is trying to shift something. And it's a big mystery how poems do that and how they move. But I think it's a question of combining some sense of an immediacy, which is important to me, with the sense of the lyric, which is sort of transcending time and transcending information, and pushing the language into another realm. And I don't know how poems work or how we get to them, but I just know that that's why they work, if that makes any sense.
It does. And the reason I invited you to the festival was that I also like the way you manage to reflect on things in your poetry. You cause the reader to think, and at the same time, you almost express a kind of childlike awe, a sense of awe, wonder, and astonishment, which is really a key quality of all your poems. It's quite remarkable. But anyway, I must stop praising you and leave you to read the next poem, please.
Yeah. So this one is called Together. You can be born by a river, but will die at the foot of a mountain. Your left hand murders a chicken, your right prays for its safe passage. Duality shows you the gaps. When I think of together, I don't think of Advaita or Hegel, but of music in a room, everyone tapping their feet to the same tune. My mother in a dance hall in Wales, mouthing "Love Me Do" with the Beatles before they went big. How I can see her through a froth of beehives and charmeuse, even though I don't know her yet. How there are times when your body and you are friends, not this mad chasing one another along the shore. And the people you've lost show up complaining about passports and broken necks. You can sit for hours, and it's like sitting in a language together. There's no point asking them to wait or come back, because these moments are already vanishing like the countryside. It doesn't mean you won't ever go out foraging alone or mistakenly rush past yourself in a slur of department store windows. But living is a thing we do together. The neighbor who loans you a tranquilizer, the person on the ladder above who throws you a hydrangea, bands split up when what you want is for them to stay bound. Just as love will always insist it's the first time, everything that passed before was just bad juju or a rebound. I want the world in my bed, for us to tumble forward as though we'd each given birth. Not air, not orchard, just a thing in our arms that depends on us, so we can shout above the wind, bebop, doo-wop, for the sound that returns to take us to the brink of nuclear harmony. And I thought I'd do one last poem and then we could chat. Does that sound okay, Matt?
Sounds terrific.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. And so this is the last poem in the book, and it's called Survival. Dear ones who are still alive, I fear we may have overthought things. It is not always a war between celebration and lament. Now we know death is circuitous, not just a matter of hiding in the dark or under a bed, not even a slingshot for our loved ones to carry. It changes nothing. Ask me to build a wall, and I will build it straight. When the end came, were you watching TV or picnicking in a field with friends? Was the tablecloth white? Did you stay silent or fight? I hope by now you've given up the fur coat, the frequent flyer miles. In the hours of waiting, I heard a legend about a woman who was carried off by winds, a love ballet between her and the gods, which involved only minor mutilations. How I longed to be a legend, to stand at the dock and stare at this or that creature who survived, examine its nest, marvel at a tusk that can rake the sea floor for food. Hope is a noose around my neck. I have traded in my rollerblades for a quill. Here is the boat, the journey, the camp. If we want to arrive, we must push someone off the side. It is impossible to feel the nine. How many refugees does it take to build a mansion? I ask again, shall we wait or run? Here is winter, the dense pack ice. Touch it. It is a reminder of our devastation, a kind of worship, an incantation.
Thank you very much, Tishani. Fantastic. I want us to look at, if not read, at least 4 more poems. So not too much chat in between, but I do want to ask you, your book is published by one of our favorite publishers, Blood Axe. We have had a number of poets from them over the years. And in fact, our festival, even though it deals with prose fiction, prose fact, biographies, etc., at the heart, in our founding spirit, is the word and the word of poetry. We love it. And I look at titles as well as contents pages. And A God at the Door. Now I know it appears Neil Astley had a hand in the cover design, but did the title come from you, from Blood Axe, or where?
No, it was my title, yeah. And it came through a poem in the book called Hope is the Thing, which is also one of the, towards the end of the book. And I think partly because I realized I had been really questioning what we could still consider holy, or this sense of pilgrimage, of finding oneself, whatever our sense of divinity is, our relationship with the environment, with each other. And so this sense of the idea of a God at the door, it came from this poem. And it seemed also, I also directed Neil to this wonderful photographer, Karen Knorr, whose photo this is. And you see this symbol of this Sarus crane, and in this gorgeous old palace, and there's this monkey looking straight at us. And I kind of knew that I wanted this cover, and I had checked with Karen and she was okay. And so we managed to get it. So I really feel that it's one of those instances where the title and the cover and everything came together really well. It doesn't always happen like that with books, you know. So yeah. But Neil is wonderful, and Blood Axe is amazing. And I think that there's always this sense of understanding what the the heartbeat of the collection is, what's running through, and so this question of hope, this question of holiness or unholiness, this question of the sacred or the profane, these dualities are all the way through the book.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's really nice, isn't it, for an author, as you say, it's not always like that, but for an author to be able to have a hand in the whole thing, because after all, you are offering it to the world. Another question I want to ask you, Tishani, is you have been other things other than a poet, as most people are many things, but I wondered how a particular physical activity that you did at quite a high level has any bearing or not on your writing, and that is as a dancer, as a professional dancer. Does it have any link there?
Yes, incredibly. I mean, I think I look at the career of coming to be a writer and dance as being something that happened simultaneously, even though I had never wanted to be a dancer, but I had been wanting to be a writer quite early on. So writing is what I aspired to do, and dance just happened to me. I met a woman who became my mentor, and I started to train kind of late for a dancer in my mid-20s, and I really learned what it was to sort of become an artist through her. But I think there's so many things that speak to each other when you're thinking about dance and poetry. And particularly for me, it's the question of time, this sense of how is time operating within the body, and the question of rhythm, the question of slowness, the question of how do you recreate, how do you manipulate time, how do you understand time. And I feel like with dance, it's all layered in the body, this sense of rhythm. And with the poetry, it comes out in a different sense, a manifest, So it's quite abstract, but there's also very much, I think, and the poetry and the dance are informed by many themes. And I would say the most important theme of that is the idea of the human body, which has been part of my work from my first collection, Countries of the Body, all the way through. I feel like I always take the body as the starting point. And so that sense of viscerality, the sense of the poems being taught, the sense of the leanness of them is very important to me. And I think that comes from my training as a dancer.
I felt it had a bearing, and I only discovered that you were a dancer after I'd read some of your poems. And it's partially explained for me how quite often poets are very inward, and it's good, it's a good place, the inward place. But yours is also inward and outward. For example, I'm in danger of asking you to read the poem because it feels more appropriate for you to read that particular poem than me. I think it's called the Address. Address is like a field. It's on page 72. And I also like the poem Trees, is my shorthand for it. The Tree of Life poem. I love that. Maybe we can take turns. Maybe if you read the Dress is Like a Field and I read the Tree of Life. What do you think of that, Tishani?
That sounds good. Yeah.
In which order shall we do it?
I can go first and then you can follow up.
That would be lovely. Thank you.
Okay. A dress is like a field. A dress is like a field. Lift a hem and flowers will fall. Fold it in a wooden chest and weeds will lay their fingers against its cotton heart. A dress is sin. Take Marilyn. Take Subway Great. Take, you must have had to paint that on you. Flamenco ruffle, zipper, Cleopatra in gold, lame, little black something. When we were girls, we played at dressing up. Mum's swimsuit with the built-in bosoms, a lesson in seduction. The past is a yard in Wales. My mother and her sister in matching seersucker frocks, hands in pockets, high collars, the wind making petticoats of their hair. They join a ship of sisters. mothers with needles and thread, holding boats of cloth against their chests, thinking this will do, this will sail them across the years. A singer's sewing machine in Madras, my sister and I in handmade smocks with floral bibs and frills, aspiring zazoos with high socks and lacunas of knees. If I had daughters, I dressed them in velvet suits with cummerbunds so they could roll down meadows and scorch the wilds of their insides against grass. A dress needs only a mosquito net to be a bride, and later, as it yellows in a bag, it will dream of being a factory girl, a school child, something lumpen and uniform, to recognize itself in the other. A dress never loses its sense of the dramatic. It knows how to languish across a washing line, how to beckon from a mannequin, how to sit puddled on a floor. See, this riverbank, there's a row of them, unbelted, unbuttoned. The river calls for an afternoon of love, a picnic, clots of copper maple, legs of bone, seams turned towards the sun. Nothing like abandoned shoes, which glow with horror, the piles at Dachau, trains, gunshots, dead bodies in water. A dress is a forest of memory, its damask skin, its armpits of toil and wonder. Even the holes are altars to fairy tales, reminding you how once you were so small, once your waist was a secret nation.
Thanks very much, Tishani. You mentioned Wales in there. What's your connection?
My mother is Welsh. She grew up in a small village called Nurkwith in North Wales, which is near Mold, which is near Chester. And I mentioned her in the other poem as well, Together. One of the lovely stories I know about my mother is that she went to a dance hall in Mold and heard the Beatles before they went big. And I love that sense of personal history colliding with world history, and when I think of the Beatles and the effect that they had on the world. So she came to India when she was 21. She met my father in Canada. They fell in love, and she's been here for more than 50 years. So Wales has always been my elsewhere, the place of some summers, the place of visits, the place of relatives. It's a place that feels home and other, but a place I claim nonetheless.
Thank you very much. Thank you for letting me read one of your poems, one of the 6 I like. We've already had one. The one I'd like to read, Tishani, is Tree of Life. Tree of Life. It could be romantic to sleep in a tree with all the sounds of the forest around, insect cacophony, elephants in must. I have always loved the word rut, a seasonal glut, the opposite of looking through a window to a never-ending view, of wives washing dishes in the sink, Simone de Beauvoir's idea of the domestic abyss. But reader, she had silk curtains and chandeliers. She had multiple lovers and appointments with Sartre in the Jardin de Luxembourg. It is dangerous to romanticize anyone's life, especially low, to purge the nobility of the poor. So let me not say how much I cried, watching Satyajit's raise Patha Panchali, especially the part with the kids running through the fields of cash to watch the train of modernity pass. More poignant if you know the director's wife had to pawn her jewels for the film to be made. The goodness of some women, they almost levitate, like the girl in the film, Child of the Forest, how she picks thorns from her feet like stones from rice. And the crone, how I love the crone, how all this sadness builds like a ragga to bring on rain, which the girl rushes into, of course. Ripples of water lilies, siege of cranes, how all this joy leads to death. There are no spare rooms, is the point, in the film or real life. There are no spare rooms, so these men who've returned from the city are put in a tree to quarantine, a tree that strangles its hosts as it walks. Munificent, shade-giving banyan that hurls down roots as trunks, in whose leaves God Krishna is domiciled. Krishna, who talks of good games, about the temporality of the body while enjoying the bliss of so many pretty bodies, understood the material world as one huge inverted banyan. And as we're here in this reflection, why not enjoy the fruits? Why not leap from branch to branch like a hoopoe, which these men do, I suppose. Their good wives leave supplies at the base, rice and oil, cooking implements. It goes like this for days, this story of 7 men in a tree surviving a 21st century pandemic. Men who say they please not to pass on any bad city virus. And because the news is so full of horrors and counterfeits, can we for once just succumb to the romance before us? Forget that the tree is moving, that one day its phantom limbs will tap against our door. Till then, can't we stand by our windows and stare at all the desolation and sweetness? Can't we adore the convoluted roots of our attachments, how they complete us? My God, how this living is a hymn. And that poem started with a quote from the Hindustan Times, which said, Bengal men self-quarantine on a tree to keep others safe. That was the spur for you, was it, for that poem?
Yeah, it was a story that caught my eye when India went into lockdown, one of the longest national lockdowns in the world in March. You might have heard stories of how, people were given 4 hours before the lockdown started, and the thousands and thousands of laborers who work in big cities suddenly found themselves at a loss. They had no job, they had no guarantee of money, so they had to get home to their villages, and so there became this huge walk home. Literally millions of people walking back to their villages because all public transportation had stopped. And so you had this scene, very apocalyptic scene of people taking to the highways, walking, and people dying of starvation, people dying of heat, people making it back to their villages. And in all of those stories, there was this story of these 7 men who came back to their village. And because they came from families that didn't have much. They had sort of 1-room houses. They couldn't be kept in a separate room. They were kept in this tree. And that reminded me of Satyajit Ray's film Patar Panchali, The World of Apu, and a kind of a sense of life in the forest and what it means. And so, yeah, the poem grew many arms and legs in different directions, but it definitely came from that one headline of these 7 men quarantining in a tree, which I just thought was somewhat strange and whimsical and almost like a fairy tale in a way.
But I loved the arms
Although
and the legs.
it wouldn't have been, yeah, sorry, it wouldn't have been very comfortable for them. But I feel that sense of their sense of wanting to keep others safe. And it also reminded me strangely of a book that I loved as a child, which was Enid Blyton's Magic Faraway Tree. So separately, sorry, you were saying.
No, it's just lovely how a single line can set you off thinking, and before you know it, it has as you call them, all these arms and legs, absolutely, or branches and twigs, if we're going to extend the tree metaphor. We're coming to the end, alas, Tishani. What did Wordsworth say? Long we had not talked, and we built up a pile of better thoughts. And one could easily go on, but I want to come to a last poem. And I've already mentioned your strong, plain language, your ability to reflect on things and so on. But you also have a touch that is sort of, you're very in touch with what one might call popular culture. I don't want to sound too lofty, but you're able to touch on these things, but without dumbing down at all. In fact, I think this poem ends with two nice questions. I love your questions, by the way, as well. Not all poets ask questions in their poems, but you do. And I wonder if you wouldn't mind reading it. I'm springing this upon you, and it is Why the Brazilian, etc. It's on page 20.
Yes.
If you're happy to make that your last poem, is that all right, Tishani?
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything about it?
Yeah, this is also inspired by a news story I heard on the BBC, which was about some women who had died after having this Brazilian butt lift. So you kind of need to know what a Brazilian butt lift is in order to understand the poem. And for readers who may not know, it's a surgical procedure used to enhance the bottom. So yeah, okay. Why the Brazilian butt lift won't save us. The body refuses happiness. That was once upon a time. That was long ago, when you could run naked through a field without consternation, you and your perfectly sized baby parts. The body grows dissatisfied once it starts towering over dogs and staring into the hearts of kitchen counters. Pretty soon, your altar body is calling from a downtown phone booth saying, listen, baby, you need to step up the retinoids. We know, don't we, that a forest is being truncheoned as we speak, that a girl in that forest is being truncheoned too, a girl or 100, that all the words we have for my heart can't take it anymore won't be able to describe what happens to the body at the end of that. Still, the body wants to be glorious while it can. It sees lips burgeoning like a hokusai wave and thinks, I'll have some of that. It sees bones Caravaggio might have dreamed of and microbladed eyebrows and neat marble apples the size of a generously cupped hand and says, yes, yes, yes. But mostly it sees Kim Kardashian's ass rising like a mountain out of the Atlantic and thinks, I too want to oversee a metropolis. And why shouldn't it? Aren't we all trying to get back to a time before the blemishes, when the body was carefree with no stretch marks and pristine platelet-rich hair, an origami crane built to withstand the damaging effects of light, gusting on thermals to fly against any mushroom cloud? So what's a few small wounds to the forehead? What's a needle the size of your life?
Tishani, great, two great questions at the end. Thank you very much. I'm afraid we have to stop there. The Swindon Festival of Literature, thanks you very much for joining us, Tishani. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt. It's been wonderful. And I do hope to visit Swindon in real time, in real life, when the clouds pass and when things become safe again. Thank you for having me at your festival.